think about growing up?
Alright.
Or growing apart?
There's something wrong with Pete.
Smarten up. Look around you. This is my gang here. So you, your geek girlfriend over there, and everybody else better just stay out of my way.
If you love Pete just to make him change, then you're loving him for the wrong reason.
Welcome back to Boys Bible Study, the alpha and omega of podcasting. My name's Ash. I'm here with my co-hosts,
Scott
and Julian.
So, today's film is actually one of our most requested. And after watching it, I can see why. The movie we watched today had like a really riveting plot. I would say we all learned a big lesson. And we're all very glad that we're finally getting to cover it today on Boys Bible Study.
I thought we were watching the Sopranos prequel.
Yes, honestly.
For most of this.
Honestly, yeah, sort of still going through my Sopranos watch right now. I've got to say there were a lot of parallels between the Sopranos and the ButterCream Gang.
It could be in the same world.
It's basically like halfway between like the Freemasons and the Sopranos. Like that's how I saw the ButterCream Gang. Now, I hadn't seen this film before, but I'd heard of it. Have either of you actually seen this one before?
Oh, yeah. Saw this multiple times as a kid. This came out in 1992, and I saw it right around then. I must have seen it like right after it came out, honestly.
Yeah.
I'd never seen this, but I feel like something about the name of it sort of like triggers that weird, like not deja vu, but like it sounds like something I heard at some point in my life before this. So like you were saying, Scott, this movie, not necessarily like groundbreaking, but you said it must have had really good distribution or something.
I think so. And I've seen it just from my like VHS shopping too throughout my life. I've seen it pretty regularly. But yeah, like it was at the library when I was a kid. I'm pretty sure. I don't think we actually owned a copy. I think we would just occasionally get it from the library. So not all Christian media will you find readily in your library.
That's very true, especially with libraries becoming increasingly secular and satanic these days.
And closed these days.
Oh, yeah. Well,
can't go at all.
No, you can't.
Just to keep people from reading more copies of the Bible.
They don't want people to wake up.
How many copies of the Bible they got in there, and how many freaking volumes of manga do they have?
Right. Yeah. So just some background on ButterCream Gang. Now, this is a feature films for families. What do we know about them? Do you happen to have any background on them?
They've put out many tapes of varying quality. For the most part, it's around this quality, though. Like made for TV, but made carefully and considerately. Like, I don't think anything was really wasted or like unnecessary in the movie. Like they had a clear vision with it. And that's how most feature films for families are. And they all have a Christian message, sometimes really strongly Christian, sometimes very vaguely, just like Christian ideals. And typically on the back of the box, they'll have like a list of questions along with it as well to go over with your family after watching it.
Well, I actually just dropped in chat, boys, a IMDb list of all of the feature films for families. IMDb lists 52 different films in order of popularity. I can't say I immediately have heard of them. The top one is called Space Camp.
Oh, yeah. I'm looking right now.
Yeah.
Space Camp is good.
Yeah.
Hoosiers is overrated, honestly, in my opinion.
The Hoosiers?
I mean, maybe they distributed it at some point.
Bach's Fight for Freedom is a family-first film about Bach. A young boy helps the rebellious Johann Sebastian Bach fight for his artistic freedom.
Oh, wow. I am familiar with more of these than not. Oh, No More Baths. I have that, but never watched it.
Huh. Yeah, I figured, especially you, Scott, as a longtime tape collector, you probably had some experience with this, pressing or...
Yes. Feature Films for Families has put out a lot of films, as you can see. Mm-hmm. More than this list, for sure.
Well, ButterCream Gang definitely seems pretty beloved, if nothing else, but based on the response and requests we've gotten for it, it seems like for people of our generation, it may have been, a foundational piece of media in their childhood.
Yeah, nobody's requesting box fight for freedom.
No, no.
Well, you could leave a 5-star review and request that movie.
Well, let's get into the film. I think that if I had to like diagnose the ButterCream Gang straight off, I would say that this is a movie about the suburbs versus the city. Like the first sort of images that we see opening up the whole film are the idyllic suburbs. You know, we got paper routes, green lawns, everybody knows your name, contrasted with one of our protagonists, Pete, who's had to move to the city of Chicago. And, you know, what do we see? Dilapidated alleys, you know, small houses. And right away you can tell that there's going to be like a conflict between these two locales.
You hear sirens in the background the whole time.
Right. And, you know, that combined with, you know, even just like the IMDb summary of the ButterCream Gang, the first sentence of it says, unlike most gangs, the ButterCream Gang does good deeds. So at that point, you can start to put two and two together and see where this movie's getting into. Kids who are left to fend for themselves on the cold city streets, of course, are going to turn to dangerous gang activity, whereas lily whites, like lumpy boys in the Midwest are going to, you know, rescue widows from falling over and like do their paper route and stuff like that, you know?
You can see the social commentary coming from very far away. I was not expecting it to be so explicitly racist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a children's movie. It's pretty much propaganda. So, of course, it would be presented without nuance as to the privileged lives of these like children in the ButterCream Gang versus whatever's happening in Chicago that one of our main characters, Pete, ends up being exposed to. But yeah, it is very explicit in mentioning that like the bad gang in the movie is Latino. Like they just straight out say it. And one of the character Pete, who joins that gang and returns home, like begins identifying as Latino, even though it's never implied, never implied or stated that he has any Latino heritage or anything. He just decides that he's going to change his last name to Valdez.
Pete Turner.
That's it.
I'd hardly recognize you.
It's good to see you. Listen, I'm thinking about changing my name to Pete Valdez. You know, that's my mom's name.
Well, Pete Valdez, I can see that you've been to the big city.
Yeah, look a little bit different, huh?
Yeah.
Well, he said it was his mom's name.
He did, but it was still very, it was interesting because they didn't, you know, because obviously, you know, casting tells a story and, you know, you meet his aunt and, you know, I don't know, everyone looked pretty white. I guess they could have been light-skinned Latino. But I literally, while we were watching, I didn't even make this joke because I thought it was going to be too obvious. But I was like, while we were watching, I was like, oh my God, he's going to start identifying as light-skinned Latino instead of white. And then like in the next scene, he's like, I'm thinking of changing my name to Pete Valdez. And it's like, are you fucking kidding me, dude? Like, how?
Yeah. And it's pretty clear, like, no matter what his descent is, it's pretty clear that he's doing that because of this is like a minute apart from us seeing the headline of a paper saying Hispanic gangs in Chicago.
Right.
Blank.
Right. He was doing that clearly to, you know, get some sort of authenticity that would allow him to, you know, fit in or like with the Chicago gangs or like feel edgy in some way. So it's clear it's for like valor. But let's step back one step. Who are the ButterCream Gang, the titular characters of this film? Who are they and what do they represent in this film?
Well, the most important buttercreamer is named Scott. I don't remember the other names.
Yeah, well, why would you? Come on. You know, and I would say just like Scott in the ButterCream Gang, you are sort of like a beacon of virtue and leadership.
Thank you.
Listen, Scott, I know that like if I maybe changed the way I dressed or, sort of drifted apart over the years, that you would condescend to me over and over again until I became a Christian once more. And I'm happy I can count on you for that. Yeah, the ButterCream Gang is a gang of, I'm going to assume Midwestern do-gooders. Did we ever establish where exactly the suburbs in this movie are?
No, I always just assumed Wisconsin for some reason.
Well, also because we just did the stream of the penny, and the penny set in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So maybe
they're so from Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. By the way, just an aside, anyone listening who may have caught our first ever stream on the Everything is Terrible Twitch channel a week ago on Sunday, we streamed the film The Penny, and it was very, very fun. So look for us to announce another one of those next month, along with a patron live stream coming soon. But yeah, Penny is set in Wisconsin. I do not know where this movie was set. It was clearly far enough away that when in the beginning of the film, our sort of prodigal son type character, Pete, is getting shipped away to his aunt in Chicago, he has to go on a long bus ride. And we do establish in the beginning that Pete is a member of the ButterCream Gang. They are a gang in giant scare quotes, okay? We're talking big scare quotes because they're not like your ordinary gang. They go around doing good deeds. Everyone knows them. And what I found the most interesting is that apparently the ButterCream Gang is like a tradition in the film. It like dates back to the First World War or something.
I ever tell you boys that my great-grandfather was one of the first buttercreamers?
Yes, 1,000.
That was during the early days of the town. After a raid, it killed several of the men. The minister asked some of the teenage boys, including my great-grandfather, to help the widows by churning their butter.
So the ButterCream Gang was birthed out of the murder of every man in town by some unnamed force.
Oh, I thought maybe they were just stealing their buttercream and that's where it came from.
Yeah, and the children needed to rise up in the place of the men and form some sort of militia to protect the widows. And I guess that's where the ButterCream Gang came from.
A little bit. Yeah, something like that. They did say there was a raid on the town and that some men were killed. It didn't exactly specify when this was, maybe as a part of the war, but like where in the United States was like raided during the war to the point where people were dying. Like it almost made me think like one of you asked like, was it potentially like Native Americans like in the like pre-Revolutionary War days, but like that didn't really track. Very strange. But yeah, I guess the ButterCream Gang emerged like 3 generations or 4 generations previous to the boys we see in the film, and it was because like they helped the widows churn their butter. So that's where these do-gooders descended from. Basically like the Shriners, except they don't get to drive the cool cars.
Yeah, they're not very cool. They really should have taken some advice from Pete when he came back from Chicago.
Right. So I completely agree. And I've got to say that in my opinion, before we get, really into the meat of the movie, I think that the ButterCream Gang is an inspiring story about a boy who learns to be cool and has to contend with his friends who don't understand him and who want to see him fail.
His friends who are like 6 years younger than him.
Yeah, he comes back. He's like, I have an additional perspective. You know me, the person who grew up with you guys and knows how everything goes in this town. Well, I have additional perspective. And they're like, that's a choice. You can just think about how things used to be.
Yeah, and it's also never explained like what happened in his life that he needed to go move to be with his aunt in Chicago, or why he lives with his grandparents in this town.
Yeah.
Right. And this would have been very important data because, yeah, it's obvious from parts that were like conveniently omitted from the film that like he has been through some kind of trauma. I mean, he doesn't have his parents. I would assume there's some trauma there, but it's never explained why. He alludes to the fact that he saw and went through some horrible things while he was in the city, but we never hear about those. This data would have been very helpful, but We did not get it. So this leads me to believe that they just people in a town such as the one where the ButterCream Gang is roaming the streets, performing vigilante justice and things of that nature. It goes to show you that like towns like that are, you know, very sort of set in their ways. Like, why would you, as you said, Scott, like come in with a different perspective or try to shake things up or even just like change the way you look and the way you dress and like your hairstyle and stuff.
Yeah. He's like pretty much wearing the same clothes he was, just differently. Like he tucks in his shirt different and like buttons it different and wears a bandana. And then the whole town is talking about how different he dresses now.
Yeah, there's the one scene where I can't even remember which like older man it is, but just yet another like older man who knows all the ButterCream Gang personally is like, yeah, Pete came back to town and he was turning heads with his new fashion. And it was just like, oh my God, like
Long time no see.
What happened to you?
What, you mean the threads? Pretty cool, huh? You like them?
Well, you look different.
Well, you do too, man, but that's cool.
I heard Pete turned some heads in town today with the way he was dressed and all. You're not judging him by the way he looks, are you?
No. Pete's always done crazy stuff to get attention.
it definitely just like got me flashbacks to just like growing up in the suburbs. Like not even that my town was very small, but just this idea that like when you're like a kid and you just like, you know, you want to like change the way you look or like just change something about your like life and anything. It's just like immediately met with like confusion and hostility from everyone. And it's like, no wonder that people eventually get resentful of like either the place where they grew up or, you know, the community that they found familiar to them that has just like completely turned hostile to them when they want to change something about themselves.
Yeah.
I couldn't help but sympathize with our antagonist, Pete.
Yeah, and like, how do you expect him to go back to the way he was if everybody is talking about how different he is? You know what I mean?
Right. It starts a cycle of like, oh, hey, I'm different. I grew, I changed. And everyone's like, wow, you're different now. Wish you'd go back to the old way. And then that builds a resentment. And then it causes the person to sort of act out and be like, oh, yeah, well, you don't like the way I am now. Well, you know, that's too bad. And because this is who I am. And then it definitely just turns into this cycle.
Doesn't he even say at one point, like, you guys never even asked me, like, why I had to come back or something about that, or never asked me, like, how I'm doing?
Real friends accept each other for who they are. You're only willing to be my friend if I change. Well, I'm not who I was, Scott. I am who I am. You never once asked me what happened in Chicago. You never once asked me. You're just like all the rest.
Yeah, yes. And then they still don't. They still never do. With all, like, Scott's, like, pious bullshit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We never hear any of them express like concern or like legit curiosity about what Pete went through in the city and why he had to come back. The only thing we do know, which we haven't explicitly mentioned yet, is that when we initially see Pete in Chicago, which is toward the beginning of the film, he definitely falls in with a gang of rough boys and they're, you know, running through the alley. He gets arrested and then he gets expelled from school. His aunt gets a letter in the mail that's from the school saying he's expelled, and she sends him back on the bus back to his hometown where he can go back and live with his grandfather. Ostensibly, he was there in the beginning to sort of like help his aunt, you know, explore the new city. And like, I guess his aunt had 2 little kids, but she was like, you know, you're supposed to set a good example for the kids, but he did not. So he had to go home. But he brought his made man sensibilities back to the hometown. And
he's a wise guy now.
He's a wise guy. Like like what Julian was saying, like this is literally like the Sopranos for kids. Like he fucking he comes back and he must be loyal to his capo, and he's literally like talking different. Like he's saying shit like oh god, I wrote something down, but he was like,
he robbed Feach LaManna's card game, and now he's got the respect of the family.
He calls Capicola Gabagool now.
He was like, at one point I wrote down, he was like, I ain't afraid of nothing. It was like, this guy's fucking a screwball now. Like, come on. He's Pete Valdez, and he's like, hey, why I oughta fucking turn you inside out, okay?
He's a tough guy.
He's a tough guy.
And he originally, it starts off in the beginning, he is the boss of the ButterCream Gang. He's the capo, and he leaves, puts Scott in charge. And I think coming back, they're like trying to tell him what to do, and it was never like that.
Yeah, he was definitely the leader.
Scott is trying to consolidate his power once he returns.
He's gonna do a hit at that Paul Castellano at Sparks Steakhouse. Yeah. Okay, so we were just talking about how Pete, when he goes to Chicago, he elects Scott to be the leader of the ButterCream Gang. But then he comes back, and they're trying to tell him what to do. And he's got a new outlook and a new attitude, and like he's not going to stand for that shit, you know?
And he doesn't need to.
No. He's got his own gang now.
Oh, we should talk about how he picks that new gang. Because it's pretty funny.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, let's get into that now. So yeah, you know, Pete's back from Chicago. He has a new attitude, new way of dressing. He's even considering changing his last name. And it's clear that he's outgrown the ButterCream Gang. He has no interest in do-gooding or hanging out with these, you know, prepubescent boys any longer. It's clear he's sort of aged out of it. And he decides he needs to find people more like him. So, wait, how does he find those guys? He just like scouts them out.
He's walking into high school, and it's the like first two guys he sees like pushing some other kids, and he's like, "Nice, my new friends."
He's like, "Hey, you guys are hot, you know? Let's roll together. Come on,
let's be bullies together."
Right, and Pete seems like he takes charge. Like when we start to meet him as a part of this new gang later in the film, it seems like he's telling them what to do. So, you know, clearly he has like agency. You know what I mean? Like he's the type A personality. Like it's not that he gets strung along or his like naivete makes him like ripe to be plucked into the wrong kind of gang. Like he is the bad influence. Like he's the one who makes this gang.
He's a natural leader.
He is.
Yeah, it is strange that he leaves the place where like the circumstances he was under led him to be involved in that gang in Chicago, and as soon as he left, he was just like, well, the thing I missed the most about Chicago was the gang.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I was under the impression that he was having a pretty bad time in Chicago, but the movie seemed to imply that like everything was fine. He just wanted to join a gang.
Maybe he wasn't having that good of a time in Buttercreamville or whatever the fuck either, though, you know, because they don't really get into that. Like there could have been more reason than just like, well, I got to go take care of my aunt. For all we know, it's like there's like all kinds of shit, but because they're in this Pollyanna small town, you can't like really. Maybe he's like never feels fully understood.
Right. And I also think it just goes to the film's like central thesis that the city is a corrupting force. You know, like the city is a holder of bad influence, especially like, you know, non-white, like corrupting influence.
And it's like not even a theme. They're so casual about it.
Right.
Even though it influences what the movie is so hard. It's just like, well, obviously.
Right. So let's get into that actually, because there's a couple specific places when the movie, you know, we already talked about it a little bit, but just to be specific, there is a scene where Pete has come back and Scott is really confused by his new friend's strange behavior and his new tough look. And a girl in school named Margaret, who Scott, you know, I don't know if he has a crush on her, but they sort of, you know, end up in this middle school romance. But he bumps into her and her papers fall over. You know, she drops her papers and he picks them up and he notices that she's doing a report on like, is it literally called like Mexican gangs in Chicago or like Latino gangs?
Hispanic gangs
in Chicago. And Scott, like a light bulb goes off in his head. Like he's looking at this and it just lays it bare. It's just like, okay, so if you're like white and you go to the suburbs, you might meet, you know, Hispanic people and they will initiate you into one of these Hispanic gangs. And then, you know, who the hell knows what could happen to you? You know, that was one moment where the movie just really like said the quiet part loud.
Yeah, he didn't really do that much bad stuff with his new gang. Like, they kind of just dicked around, like broke bottles next to the railroad tracks, started a small fire.
Oh, you mean his new gang?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, how corrupt was he, really, if you think about it?
Yeah, it's interesting because they didn't really do anything more than, like, small town shit. I don't know. I was, like, pretty much like a prude and goody two-shoes my whole life. But, I mean, even I took part in activities that were, like, on par of the, you know, quote-unquote gang activities in his town. Like,
Setting,
you know.
They just like set a box on fire in an empty lot, and like all of a sudden they're just like, it kind of makes me think like the blowback from their actions was so much worse than the actual actions.
Yes.
And like everyone's reactions to what they were doing really just like fed into Pete's anger and self-loathing, and like sort of like all of his friends sort of just saying like, hey man, you're different, you're bad now.
Yeah.
Sort of like set him on that path.
Well, and then once they like stop, just when they just decide to stop showing their anger after talking to some trusted adults, which is literally every adult in this town except the one really obviously bad adult.
We'll get into that
which is
in a sec. I definitely
feature films for families trope in general. What they do then is just treat him like a baby. So like he's like they don't never take him seriously, and he just wants to be taken seriously for like what his deeper rooted troubles are, because nobody's acknowledging it. And so like once he's in the store and like he tries to steal money and he's like, you don't have to steal it, Pete, I'll just give it to you. And they just like he needs a different reaction than they're giving.
Right.
They're both giving too much of a reaction and no proper reaction at all. Like they're not actually giving him the help that he needs. They're just like handling it in the way that they just talk amongst themselves. Don't ask him about what's going on with him, and then keep like setting him up. Like literally at one point they get him to wander into a football game, and then they like hike him the ball, and then he drops the ball and walks off. And you're, as the viewer, you're supposed to be like, oh, come on, Pete, be a sport. But like, of course that's not going to work.
Yeah, it's so condescending and weird, and
it's really condescending.
Yeah, and you know, it really just, and of course the movie doesn't tell this part of the story, but yeah, you really can't help but feel like his behavior cycle is just like just becomes like a self-perpetuating like reaction to how everyone's treating him. Everyone's marked him as different, and he's acting in according to their expectations. You know, he's just giving them exactly what they expect of him.
In the meantime, he just wants to get back to Chicago.
Right.
And he's talking about that the whole time.
Right. And, well, he eventually does, as we'll find out in a little bit. But before I bring up his eventual return to Chicago and the twist ending, are there any like important plot points that we should discuss before we hit that?
I was glad that they brought through the trope of so Margaret is like a nerd the whole time, and then she calls in a favor from Scott because he gets all of her gang research since it's 92 and he doesn't have the internet yet. And so she's like, all right, but you owe me a favor, and her favor is to go to the dance with him.
I came to collect on that favor you owe me.
Well, I thought talking to Pete was a favor.
No, that's just the right thing to do. The favor is for you to take me to the dance tonight. Pick me up at 7 and don't be late.
But she's a nerd with glasses. But then he goes to pick her up for the dance, and turns out when she takes her glasses off, she's a total babe.
Amazing.
What a lucky guy.
Yeah, Scott's such a looker himself. Like, let's be real. Not you, Scott. Of course, I'm referring to the little dweeb and this fucking these baby Freemasons.
Yeah.
It's confusing. Like, do they Do they look down on him just associating with any girls, or is it just this one specific one that they're like, oh, she's a nerd?
I mean, they would have given him shit regardless,
Yeah.
It's hard to say, though, because the rest of the women in this film, girls or grown up, are all NPCs. So
yes, of course.
Yeah. Oh, except for Pete's aunt.
Right.
She has a small part.
Even the ButterCream Girl Gang calls themselves the ButterCreamettes. You know what I mean? They can't even define themselves unless it's in reaction to the existing ButterCream Gang, who, of course, like deserve their status and have like a historic reason to exist in this town.
So I guess a couple plot points along the way are the Pete throwing the firecracker at the dance is like the last straw.
Yes.
That's to show that he's truly descended into madness.
He's extremely Joker vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah. The firecracker and also him heckling his former good friend at the baseball game.
That part was kind of funny because it worked. His heckle worked.
Yeah, that part rocked.
And he hit a pop fly to end the game. But one thing that was genuinely scary, not the firecracker part, that was genuinely mean, but when he and his two new gang cronies are just circling Margaret and they show those quick close-ups of their faces going back and forth and they're all like talking shit to her, like riding in a tight circle around her. That part's like kind of scary.
Yeah, what the fuck?
Yeah, very unsettling. And when Scott gets jumped later by the gang, it was a little too real, it felt like. There are a couple of moments where this gang got a little too real for me.
Definitely.
But that's life, you know?
Yeah, that's the gang life. You know what you're signing up for.
Yeah.
So they say.
Yeah. Doesn't make it okay, though.
And another big crime, like, so now getting into the actual crime that Pete commits is when he somehow convinces like a grown-ass man to like pretend to hold him hostage at his grandfather's home so he can get the gold coins.
I want those gold coins now. Now you give them to me right now or I'm gonna hurt this kid real bad.
You better listen to him, Gramps.
I've told you I don't have them here. They're down at the bank in a safety deposit box.
Oh, come on, Grandpa. I saw him here the other day. Don't worry about it. The insurance will pay for it. Don't let him hurt me.
What the fuck was that about? How did he meet this man?
Just some Chicago connection.
You telling me this guy came all the way from Chicago?
I don't know. Maybe.
Pete probably promised he was going to like pay him to pay his way back, you know, because he was just trying to get enough money to get back to Chicago at that point.
Huh.
So maybe those gold doubloons. It was also very strange that his grandpa had like gold coins in a safety deposit box.
He's a libertarian.
Yeah. I guess that was the most realistic part about this. Tell us where your Iraqi dinar is, Grandpa.
Okay, yeah. The most realistic part about the movie was the grandpa was hiding gold coins. The least realistic part was the grandpa didn't just immediately shoot the guy with a rifle, like as soon as he came to the house. But you know, that's just not the way it goes in Buttercreamville or wherever.
Buttercreamville, USA.
Yeah.
So also worth noting, the only real crime that happens this whole movie, this crime we're discussing now, who stops this intruder but none other than the Buttercreamettes.
Right.
Do they?
Right.
I thought they just reported on it. The heavyset kid, the husky kid, jumped on the guy's tummy and it killed him.
Well, they like already had grabbed his legs to get him to trip.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Then the heavyset Buttercreamer does a dive bomb onto his stomach and he explodes.
Yeah. I like that part was so funny because he lands on the guy and the guy like wind knocked out of him, his eyes go cross-eyed and he falls back, and then later, like half a second later, he just like tosses all the children off of him like they're weightless and then runs away.
Yeah. He was just startled, you know? His adrenaline kicked in.
So all this mayhem, too, in such a small town, it's really, you start to wonder, like, where any of the adults or, like, the sheriff shows up at the very end once Pete has already left.
Right. Yeah,
But where was everyone during this? Anytime there's a problem, like, this woman keeps falling she keeps falling over in her own house, and instead of going to get somebody, an adult nearby or anybody close by, all they can do is run halfway across town and tell the ButterCream Gang to ride their bikes over and help her out.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I get there's essentially a children's chapter of the OTO in this town, but like why does that negate like any type of like policing or like guardianship of any of them? It's very strange.
That's just how much they've come to rely on the ButterCream Gang.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to know how like their local government works. Do they have the police? Is this what a future without police will look like?
Do you remember at the beginning of protesting how there was that like 10-year-old like member of the National Guard or something? Did we ever get a follow-up on that?
It was just a guy who looked really young,
It was
right?
a short guy. Okay.
Yeah, I think just a little guy.
It wasn't a buttercreamer?
Right. Basically, so what liberals want, or what, so-called leftists want, is they want to defund the police, but we all know they're just going to get replaced with armed buttercreamers. And will that be better? I don't know.
Fuck.
I just say be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. Oh, this moment isn't really related to the plot in any meaningful way, but my personal favorite scene of the whole film, as a raver myself, who's interested in electronic music, when they're at the middle school dance, and for some reason the DJ is like appears to be like maybe 19 years old, and he like grabs the mic and he's like, "Hello, middle school, are you ready for some sick ass beats?" Like basically, it was so crazy. Why was there one British character and he was the DJ?
Slow things down a bit, right? So I want to see you with that beautiful young lady or that handsome young man, all right?
Like, what's going on with that?
and then he plays Joy Electric, drops a Joy Electric track.
Are you ready for this massive tune, mates? I want to see you on the floor. ButterCream Middle School. It was pretty badass. The British, they rave better than anyone else. So I'm really happy that they're just like de facto considered rave gods, even in
small town USA middle school.
Right.
It was like those, old timey raves where it was like out in a field, everybody's rolling. Pete's got the E supply,
right,
coming in from Chicago.
Oh, he shows up with the nitrous tank and the balloons.
Yeah, and, $5 for a balloon.
Yeah. It's 5 for 2, 3 for 1, 5 for 2.
Do not take the brown buttercream.
LSD on a little blotting paper, and there's like a butter churn like design on the paper. Well, I would say then that we are ready to take this home to the final arc of the film and a surprise ending, and we're actually going to close out with the official Family First Parents Guide for discussion. But before we do that, let's let people know how this film ends. So spoiler alert if you haven't seen the ButterCream Gang, although it seems like most of you have. But if you haven't, you can watch it on YouTube, so check it out.
Yeah, so Scott goes to get advice from his pastor, priester / coach, who regales him with the tale of Mahatma Gandhi, who single-handedly, without any other factors or people at play, liberated India from British rule.
Did you know that India was still ruled by England until after World War II? They kept trying to win their independence through violence for years, but they never quite succeeded. Finally, a man by the name of Mahatma Gandhi convinced the people they could actually win their independence without using violence. In fact, somebody asked him once why he was so convinced that nonviolence would work. He said the idea of an eye for an eye only ended up making the rest of the world blind.
Through his, teachings and actions of nonviolence, and that is where Scott decides, hey, maybe you're on to something. Maybe I'll just kill him with kindness. And so that's where him and everybody in the ButterCream Gang starts treating Pete like, kind of like he's a baby. Just sort of not even really talking to him anymore. just sort of like acting like, hey, he's a part of the gang. Like we'll just ignore everything he's saying and why he's lashing out and just like treat him like he's a 12-year-old again, like the rest of us. And that doesn't work. So Scott talks to his dad, who's a very, very sleepy man, and he tells Scott the story of a Christian soldier he was stationed with in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. And that soldier would go around and introduce himself to everybody as a Christian. And he died in an attack, and he was trying to save was it like a member of the Viet Cong?
It was a fellow soldier who hated him.
Oh, it was one of his own soldiers. Yeah, he was trying to save one of his own fellow soldiers, and the dad thought that was ironic because that soldier hated his guts, which just seemed, I don't know, just like a detail you didn't really need to add or anything.
Yeah.
I knew a soldier in Vietnam who always introduced himself by saying, "Hi, I'm Scott Paulson. I'm a Christian." Needless to say, we made his life miserable. We got ambushed. The point man was down. Of course, Scott Paulson, being the man that he was, volunteered to go. The ironic thing about the whole situation was that he died saving a soldier that absolutely hated him.
It was such a strange story, and it really resonated with Scott there too, because now he could finally relate to these good deeds and just treating others as you would like to be treated because it was coming from a Christian perspective instead of, Gandhi, whatever he is.
Well, those two stories together too. The first one, they're like, violence never works. And the second one, they're like, when you go to war, make sure you tell everyone you're a Christian.
Right.
Yeah. It was very strange. It was like that sort of kindness is only validated when it's through a Christian perspective, because it was essentially the same lesson from both people.
It's true.
Right?
Yeah.
And, when the preacher is actually like in the church service, the one time they're in church in the film, he's also he's doing a sermon about how, and this is repeated a couple times in the movie. It's definitely important that the Old Testament doctrine of an eye for an eye, or the old doctrine of an eye for an eye, has been replaced with turn the other cheek.
The old Mosaic law of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth has been replaced. It's been replaced by the concept of turning the other cheek. And will we do it with a cheerful heart, regardless of whether or not there's a reward in it for us?
And that is, I believe, a reference to, the more violent God of the Old Testament into Jesus' teachings of the New. And this is paired with what Julian was just saying, and it definitely provides inspiration for the final straw of them trying to deal with an out of control Pete, who they basically just try to completely annoy the shit out of, to the point where he's just so frustrated that he freaks out in the middle, publicly in the middle of town.
Yeah, get that on Reddit. Publicly. Teenager goes into a penny candy store and smashes up all the certs on display.
Yeah, he goes into the store and he tries to his attempts at making people mad and robbing them and shit keep getting thwarted. So he goes in the store, tries to hold it up, demands the money, and the guy's just like, well, I'll just give you all my money, $270, son. Here you go. And Pete is like, all you people have gone fucking crazy. I hate this town. And he starts just knocking everything off the shelf. And Scott comes in and is like, what are you doing? And why are you doing this? And Pete is like, because I hate myself.
Give me your money, old man. What? Open it up, come on.
Look, it's all right, Pete. If you need some money, I'll give you some.
Don't you get it, old man? You're being robbed here.
Well, I know that's what you're trying to do. But if I give you the money, then you're not robbing me. Now, here's $274. Is that enough?
What? Oh, you reminded me how good I used to be. I want you to try and stop me. That's it. I'm going to tear apart this whole store until you do stop me. You understand?
I'm confused, Pete. What do you really want?
I want you to hate me.
Why?
Because I hate myself.
Nobody asks him what that's about or anything.
No.
As they
Yeah, he
have
runs
not
away.
at all.
That's the last thing he says before he goes back to Chicago.
Right.
We never see him for the rest of the movie.
Yeah. It's Scott's method for trying to get through to him for the whole last half hour of the movie is just getting closer and closer to him while being like, I'm not going to fight you. I'm not going to fight you. I'm not going to fight you, Pete.
He should have just decked the kid.
I mean, he did.
Oh, I guess he did. Yeah,
His
never
friends
mind.
jumped him and he still kept doing it.
Yeah. God, what an annoying little... Oh, Christ.
I am rubber and you are glue, Pete.
Just leave the kid alone. Like, you're all fucking 14. You're going to see him smoking weed and be, like, upset at him. And then in 4 years, you're going to be asking him for his connect. Just, like,
Yeah.
fucking chill out.
Yeah, Pete's main message to Scott was like, leave me alone, basically. And Scott kept being like, well, remember how it used to be, Pete? And just like, I'm your friend. I'll always be your friend. I'll always be here being your friend, even when you don't want me here and explicitly don't want me here, to the point that you fight me and yell at me to leave.
I've got to say that as someone who's been through, like, many intense personal changes in my life for the better, there's nothing I find more threatening than someone being like, wow, I like the old you better. Remember how much fun we had? It just makes me want to just fucking self-immolate. Just the thought of, who I was and how I felt like 5 years ago, much to less like 10, just makes me want to like set myself on fire. So shout out to my man Pete. Like, he really got a raw deal there back in Creamville, USA. But so yeah, Pete just completely fed up, somehow not getting arrested, or just everyone, just fucking bobblehead like smiling at him as he just tries to burn everything down. He goes back to Chicago. He moves in with one of his fellow gang members. And Scott is just, not getting out of this guy's DMs. He keeps writing him letter after letter saying like, hey, I played baseball today. Like, I'm a center fielder now. Hope you write back.
Winter's pretty cold this year.
Yeah.
And Pete doesn't write back for some reason.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. Honestly, the block button was like a huge technological advance. Like, in some ways, these times suck because like you have more opportunities to just like instantly contact someone who doesn't want to hear from you. But at least you can hit the block button nowadays. I mean, you can't block a letter.
I would kill for a letter right now.
I'll write you a letter.
I mean, just instead of texting and like,
oh yeah,
I'm trying to figure out how to just get rid of the phone completely.
Oh yeah. So, we never hear back from Pete, and the movie's clearly coming to a close. They're playing the like closing music, and then fucking Scott shows up at his house, and everyone is there. And they're all like stone-faced, like serious, stone-faced.
Don't freak out, Scott. Whatever you do, don't freak out.
And like the preacher's there, Margaret's there, his parents, his friends. Isn't there like the sheriff there too?
Yeah, all the most familiar faces from the town.
Yeah.
Like everyone. And Scott comes in and he's like, what is it? Like, what is going on? And they're like, we got a letter from Pete's aunt. Get ready, Scott. Like, now it doesn't always end up like this. And like, what the fuck? And they start reading the letter, and it's like from the aunt, and the aunt's like, Pete was just in the newspaper. I'll attach the article. It should be self-explanatory. Like the way she wrote it, like she's fucking, well, I mean.
She was doing the same thing to them that they're doing to Scott.
Yeah, yeah.
What's going on? What happened?
It's about Pete. I just got a letter from his aunt today.
I just want you to know, son, it doesn't always turn out this way.
Well, what happened? Today at 2 o'clock, the mayor of Chicago honored, for the first time in the city's history, a member of a gang. That gang member was Pete Turner. Mr. Turner's gang is most unusual. Mr. Turner tells his gang, if you'll accept yourself for who you are and truly love others, a lot of good will happen.
Yeah, you think it's going to be an obituary, Pete's obituary or something.
Absolutely. And obviously that's where the movie wants you to lead. But then he opens the letter. They're like, well, you know what, Scott? You better read this for yourself. And he opens the letter, and it's like, local teen, in scare quotes, gang recognized by the city mayor.
Yeah, he started a Chicago chapter of the ButterCream Gang.
Oh.
Unfortunately, they are militant vigilantes who patrol the L train. And, you know, it's kind of up to the person you get on the train whether or not they're like what their idea of a crime is and what their idea of justice is.
You know, it wouldn't be the first Chicago mayor that worked with an actual gang.
Yeah.
My thought was that, you know, we were talking about, we speculated on
the ButterCream Gang in 2020.
Yeah. What would the ButterCream Gang in 2020 be? I think they're going to be like white hat hackers. I think they're going to be like performing DDoS attacks on like
doxing the police.
Know. Yeah, they're going to be doxing protesters and like performing, you know, DDoS attacks on like foreign governments and stuff.
I'm going far right nationalist militia. Just like the seeds are there with their like irrational hatred for Latino gangs. Like they've already got like the MS-13 fear mongering brewing in this movie.
Right. And like, well, even just think about this, the Proud Boys. Remember when, you know, everyone was talking about the Proud Boys and how they like drank milk as like a sort of performative gesture. And I mean, the name, so like I didn't even really think about this during the movie. The name of the gang is the ButterCream Gang. Okay.
Yeah. That's like double milk.
Right.
Yeah.
And like, think of that, you know, in the whole game, there's clearly a lot of anxiety about like non-white influence of like white preteens in the suburb.
Like the guy embracing his Latino heritage is them being like, you've changed for the worse.
Yes. And like, yeah, I don't know. It's just, it's crazy. Like I didn't even really realize how much even just the name of the movie and the name of the gang. Now, they explained it away with this backstory of like, they used to help the widows churn their butter, but it's like such an obvious like symbol of the, you know, the sort of like racial purity aesthetics that are running through this whole film.
Raid.
Yeah.
Like we were talking about earlier.
Right.
Yeah, what
and
was
maybe
that?
Pete wants to change his name to Valdez because like his dad was a piece of shit and wasn't really around.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It's like more power to him.
Right.
Yeah.
Which very well could have been what happened. Like we don't know.
We don't know anything. You know, we watch a freaking entire baseball game. We don't know anything about these two teams or anything. One team like gets a huge lead and then the away team comes back and we're supposed to be like, oh no, the ButterCream Gang's supposed to win. But how do we even maybe the ButterCream Gang is the bad guys.
Yeah,
right.
And you know, Julian, that's a good metaphor for this whole movie because like we knew nothing about that team. We knew nothing about Pete's background. This whole movie's about the idea of Pete. The whole movie's about their fear of Pete. It's not about Pete.
This is Pete trying to find himself. And within that, there's a story of an amazing comeback by the away team in the state championship. You know, it's a story. We're following the villains here in this movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you know what? Maybe that's a good time for us to get into the parents' guide on the back of the tape box because maybe they asked that question.
Let us. So on the back of the VHS for the ButterCream Gang, which fortunately I was able to find on Pinterest, because we do not have the tape in front of us right now. I was able to find high quality box art on Pinterest. And we actually have the Parents Guide for Family Discussion, which, as Scott was saying earlier, is a feature that is common to all, feature films for families films. So let's go through this discussion. There's 5 questions. Question 1 to you boys. When someone wrongs you, does it take more courage to fight or to find another way to solve differences? What do you think they're trying to get us to say here? Very leading questions.
I think it really depends on the individual, on what your instincts are. Like if you instinctually want to fight, then that's going to be the easier route to take. If you are terrified of fighting, then that might be the least easy route to take.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, passive aggression has worked pretty well for me in my life. Just like slowly shrinking away from the situation.
Yeah, I think just like, a lot of like abusive, self-deprecating and manipulative behavior tends to get me what I want.
Praying that it goes away and I don't have to do anything.
Yeah, well, that's the most courageous way.
Yeah.
I pretty instinctually try to problem solve and don't fight, so I think it would actually take me more courage to fight than try to solve it in a different way.
Yeah, totally. I've never been in a fight. I am. Listen, there's a reason I'm a podcaster. Okay, I'm a little better at using my words. I took a couple kung fu classes last year.
Pen is mightier than the sword.
So they say. Well, Scott did get his ass kicked in this film, but in this film, what that question is alluding to, there's a moment in the film when they're like, Scott confronts Pete, and he's like, you want to fight, but like that doesn't take a lot of courage. Fucking dumbass. Fucking little piss baby. Question 2. Does doing the right thing always bring immediate results we can see?
No.
No.
Yeah, Jesus Christ. Like these questions, they could have actually written like good, like open-ended questions that would have allowed for moral debate. These questions are such obvious, like these are just yes or no questions, basically.
That question could probably be on the box of every single feature films for family movie that exists.
You got to keep things simple for children, right?
Yeah, they're dumb as fuck. Grow up.
And never change.
I would say no, doing the right thing doesn't always bring immediate results, but you should still do it. But you know what does bring immediate results? That's praying to the golden calf that has been erected by the riverbed. In fact, I would say that, you may have heard of the Christian God. Nah, leave that behind. We got this golden calf, okay? It looks great. And let me tell you, if you pray to that calf, you're going to see immediate results. So that's my answer.
Oh, yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, we love the golden calf. Don't we, folks? Yeah. Don't we love our golden calf?
And if that works, isn't that the right thing to do every time?
Absolutely. Question 3. When people don't like themselves, how do they usually treat others?
I think that's another... I think it's another case-by-case one.
Yeah, and it's just, sometimes people lash out because of stuff other people did to them, not because they hate themselves.
Right.
You could be upset with your situation, but that's not necessarily hating yourself.
Right. Yeah, the movie really gave the game away because, again, and this happens with, we often see the trope in Christian films about, the atheist who's an atheist because something wrong has happened in their life. I don't know, their son died or, something like that. We've seen in films.
And somebody always dies.
Right, exactly.
That's the only reason there's atheists.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, this isn't exactly the same situation, but it has a sort of similar way of dealing with a complicated problem. They just have the character come out and say, the reason I'm doing this is because I hate myself.
Which is what should be the problem. Like this question, the first part, when people don't like themselves, the second part should be like, what can you do to try to help them?
Yes.
Not how do they usually treat others? Like just practically, how do you deal with them? Like
that's actually genuinely a really good improvement to this question. Like that would be a good example of like an open-ended moral question you could have with kids when watching this film, because clearly like, if you have someone you care about and they start going through self-destructive patterns, they hate themselves and stuff like that, that can be really difficult for them and for you. What can you actually do to support them? Not just be like, well, you know what? They're a bad person now, but it's because they don't like themselves. So that's too bad, But question 4, why does Scott give Pete his bike?
Because he's that passive aggressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pete,
What?
you're my friend. You'll always be my friend, no matter what you do.
So if I take that bike away from you, what are you gonna do about it?
Here. Now you don't have to take it.
It's kind of like to show how fucking baller he is. He's like, I got 5 more of these at home. It's my theory. He's just balling out. Last question. What does unconditional love mean?
I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory, right?
Yeah, love without condition.
Dictionary thing.
There you go. I think we got them all right.
Oh, there was another dictionary question in the movie too, real quick.
Oh yeah.
Pete and the bullies are circling around Margaret, and then Scott stops it, and Pete's like, "We were just trying to have a little fun," and Scott says, "Why don't you look up fun in the dictionary?"
Oh, got his ass.
And we did, and the answer is enjoyment, amusement, or lighthearted pleasure. So I guess they were having fun. I mean, it was at the expense of someone else, but tracks.
Which is not nice. But
No, not at all.
The word fun doesn't have like a moral implication there,
Yeah.
No, look at the Joker. Look at the frickin' Joker.
He's having a lot of fun. Look at him. He's laughing. Yeah, very Joker-fied film. Well, yeah, I would say, that was a pretty good summary of the ButterCream Gang. Honestly, very dense movie. I don't know, just sort of with the very saccharine art and name. I've got to be honest, I wasn't expecting a really deep watch, but there was a ton to discuss. So I'm glad we finally did it. What is everyone's final thoughts and rating? Official Boys Bible Study rating of the ButterCream Gang.
It was a great outing from Family First. I can't wait to watch the sequel where it looks like they go looking for pirate treasure or something.
Oof.
Maybe the grandpa's gold coins.
Oh.
So I'm going to give this one an MS 13 out of 13.
Wow, perfect rating. I love this movie. It took me back to childhood. I love that main song in this. I wish they had used it more watching it this time. It's a really good theme song. We'll pipe it in.
Looking back on a younger man, long ago and far away, living in an age of innocence, in the shadows of a brighter day. Time stood still and it never seemed that our worlds could grow apart. It was all for one and one for all, straight from the heart.
I'm gonna rate this 5 out of 5 feature films for families, parents' guide for family discussion questions.
All right.
Yeah, overall, I would say perfect film. I can understand why it's a fan favorite because there was a lot to unpack. I've got to say, I'm going to give this film, a $270 from the old man's cash register. And that, of course, is a perfect score because that's all he's got in the register. And you know what? It was also a perfect score because he's just going to give it to me for free. You know what I mean? It's not even a crime. It's just what I deserve. So that was the ButterCream Gang, folks. I'm pretty inspired to do some good deeds after this. What do you think we should do?
I heard a fellow podcaster fell over.
That's perfect.
We got a bike over to Brooklyn because I don't know, one of the hosts of Chapo Trap House fell over and can't get
Oh,
up.
you know what? I gave my bike to Pete yesterday.
No, fucking rube. Why would you do that? He's a real
Too
asshole.
kind.
He's a real asshole now that his name's Valdez.
I'll get my parents to buy me a new one. It's no big deal.
Yeah. Well, I think the good deed we'll do is our final plugs. We want to shout out our beloved patron saints, Nicole and Marissa. Thank you very much for your pledge at the Sainthood $20 tier. And a big thank you to all of our patrons. It's very encouraging. We can't do it without you. And we would like to let anyone know who's just joining us that if you like our episodes and want to hear more, visit patreon.com/boysbiblestudy and subscribe at the $5 tier or higher to get access to 2 or more bonus episodes every month. We also do live streams monthly for our patrons. We will announce our September live stream soon. We've added to our repertoire. We're also doing free live streams once a month as well on the Everything is Terrible Twitch channel. We just experimented with our first one last week. It went great. So much fun chatting with everyone. We'll be showing secret films. So yeah, we got 2 live streams now. One free, one for patrons only, where you get a more intimate experience. Subscribe to twitch.tv/everythingisterrible666. to watch our show and the many other programs that EIT will be putting out soon on their brand new Twitch channel. Our outro song is Oh My God by Mary. Stream Mary on Bandcamp and Spotify. On behalf of myself, Ash, my gang, in scare quotes, members, Scott and Julian, we wish you, as always, peace be with you.
And with you over here.
I'm benedicting over here, okay?
Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I feel your love in me, it's coming from within. Oh my God, my devotion is so unwavering. Divine emotions when you enter me. Every day you take me high with your love, and I've never been before. I need you to wash away my sin. Open back to let you give me a sin, and I give you all I got. Non-stop, oh my God, yours is a
I meant to do many Chicago hot dog jokes, but I didn't get even.
Oh, yeah.
Of course he wants to go back there. They got the best freaking hot dogs in the whole country, okay? Anyway.
I'm gonna
Yeah,
stop
feel free
my
to stop
recording.
recording.